Stemming from the Pathways group in St. James, the calls for regulating church groups have again gotten louder. It has been loudest on social media, but church leaders have also shared their views with our news center. For President of the Independent Churches of Jamaica, Bishop Neville Owens, regulation is needed.
Government has a responsibility to govern in all spheres pertaining to justice, equity, the law. And so it may come to that.
Moderator of the United Church in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, Reverend Gary Harriott, believes there should be oversight, but not by the government.
Sit down and to think through this matter, and then to have a common position, then we can then approach the government. But I wouldn't want to give government any kind of instruction now, because you also have to be careful. You don't want a situation where government manipulates or takes control of the religious space. That's a danger, so you have to watch that as well.
Now, those are church leaders. Now, for a legal perspective, we are joined by TVJ's legal analyst, Dion Jackson Miller. Dion, firstly, ritualistic killings, a sector probably out of control. Do you think the cause for regulation is valid?
Well, there may very well, Herman, be a legitimate argument for regulating churches, but since this is taking place in the context, this discussion is taking place in the context of what happened at Pathways, I'm going to suggest that no, there isn't. When bad things happen, we tend to have a knee-jerk reaction to call for more laws, stronger laws, more regulation, even when that isn't necessarily the problem. So look at the allegations of some of the things that may have happened at Pathway. If it is, for instance, that there's murder, we have laws against murder. We have a law against assault. We have laws against unlawful wounding. We have laws against unlawful use of firearms. If it is that children are in dangerous situations, we have the Child Care and Protection Act that gives the court the power to remove children who are in dangerous situations and place them elsewhere. So we could very well, for instance, set up a register of churches similar to the register of companies under the Companies Act, the register of charities under the Charities Act, that would say to be a church, you have to throw open your books, you have to meet certain regulatory requirements. To be named a pastor, you have to meet certain requirements. But is that going to address the fundamental issue? Is that going to stop me from gathering 20 people in my yard, calling it a religious club? I can't call myself pastor, but I can call myself Her Excellency, or president, or leader, and then preaching the doctrine and telling them to drink Kool-Aid, as is, for instance, the case that unfortunately happened in Ghana with the Jim Jones situation. I don't think additional regulation is what is needed to address the concerns that we've seen arise in this case.
Now, earlier you mentioned rights. Would getting regulation for churches be a breach of those rights for Jamaicans?
Well, there are a number of rights that, as you mentioned, are in fact engaged here. So, of course, people have the right to freedom of religion. You have the right to freedom of expression. You have the right to freedom of thought, freedom of belief, freedom of conscience. And very importantly, there is a right to peaceful assembly and association. And, of course, rights can be limited in the public interest and the interest of others. But what kind of rights are we talking about limiting here? And to what end? If the concern is to prevent abuse of power and undue influence, I'm going to suggest that setting up registries and putting that kind of regulation in place isn't going to stop abuse of power. And I give you as Exhibit A, the Roman Catholic Church, which is one of the biggest, most established, most official churches in the entire world, and which for decades across multiple jurisdictions protected child predators who perpetuated unspeakable crimes against children. Officialdom and regulation and registration is not always the answer.
All right, well, some persons would say there is obviously an issue here. What would you suggest then be the approach to fix what we have here?
Well, we have systems, so the systems need to work. So, for instance, again, going back to the Child Care and Protection Act, do our people, for instance, who are in contact with children, are we sure that if teachers see red flags involving children who are in certain situations that they know they have an obligation and a duty to report? And are they reporting? And other people who may come into contact with children? In this particular case, there is at least an allegation that reports were made to the police and that the police never followed through on those reports of concern. Those are issues that we need to investigate. Those are symptoms that we need to fix. Look, I know that people are hurting. I know that people died here, so we're looking for an easy fix. And legislation and regulation always seems to be it. I just don't think it's it in this case.
Okay, so no regulation, enforce the laws that are there.
Well, in relation to dealing with the concern about cults, I don't think registration and regulation is going to be able to stop that from happening.
Okay, thank you very much. Dion Jackson Miller, our legal analyst here on TVJ.